Hold on for a second. What's up, YouTube family? I would like you guys to make sure you like and subscribe to our video. It would help us get into the algorithms so we can be seen and bring more engaging content to you guys. So like I said, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Appreciate you. To another edition of the Pick and Downs podcast. I'm your host, per usual, Sean Tyson here with Zoo and P. Bush. How you guys doing?
Doing well. Yeah. Unfortunately, Andy's still out in China with his family. Once again, prayers to him. But this is a topic that I'm sure he is sad to be missing. I know if you've been listening to us over the past couple of years, Zoo's always been the running back guy when it comes to fantasy football. And I think him, either it be misgivings from last year with the Tony Pollard, which we always give him crap for, or just, kind of an accumulation of, obtaining CD Lamb last year was a big thing for him, and it almost won him or put him in the playoffs. But then everybody's kind of shifting their focus a little bit more, I'd say, 55-45 in favor of the wide receivers. And that's very evident by how many are going in the first round this year, which I don't know about you, Sean, but I haven't seen it this top heavy on the wide receiver end in a long time.
Yeah, I feel like the tier 1 and tier 2 guys that are in the receiver class this year, it's just you can't go wrong. And the cool thing about that is, if you're drafted in the tier 1, you're definitely more than likely going to have a receiver 1, but there could be a guy in tier 2 that could burst out and put themselves in that tier 1 category. So, I said, echoing your sentiments with Zoo, like I said, I'm going to keep saying his name because he's here with us in spirit, and I'm pretty sure he'll be watching the pod when he gets a chance. So,
absolutely.
With that, we're going to be looking at receivers for fantasy, like Zoo or people were saying. It's just more of starting to trend a little bit more towards receivers because there's just so many options. So, via the way of P. Bush in our notes pre-pod, he had two guys that he wanted to compare, which I thought were really good comparisons, and Puka Nacua and Garrett Wilson. And P. Bush, I'll let you do the honors of who you would take. Yeah. They're both on the board.
I mean, they're back-to-back, right? In the ADP, I think most drafts, they go pretty much once the first goes, the next one goes. Because if you're that guy, Garrett Wilson goes first, and then you're not the next guy, but the one after, you're hoping that the other one falls to you instead of having to decide on, a Devonta Adams if you're still targeting wide receiver there. But, yeah, man, I would say, with both of these guys, I actually have injury concerns for different reasons. Yeah. For Puka, it's because he does have his ongoing knee injury right now. I was reading up on it a little bit today. Looks like it's called a bursa sac. It's like this fluid sac that kind of prevents your tendons from connecting with your knee, your kneecap pretty much, and creating a lot of friction. And it pretty much burst. So he's very much week to week right now. There is no ligament damage, right? They did an MRI on him. So if you're kind of looking at him, either you're in a dynasty and you somehow were able to keep him and you pulled him off in your rookie draft last year, good for you. I know a couple buddies that did that. Or you're looking at him to be spending a very valuable late first-round pick or early second-round pick, depending on your league size. This is something that you should be concerned of because, Sean, you remember – Cooper Kupp had his injury, in preseason. I think Jamar Chase has dealt with preseason injuries, and not that they haven't been able to produce, but they weren't able to stay on the field consistently the rest of that season. So just something to keep in mind with Puka. And then on the Garrett Wilson side, not him specifically, but Aaron Rodgers' injury. He's coming pretty much down to everyone knows his highlight tape was 8 seconds last year carrying out the flag. And so he's pretty much going to be a year removed from his Achilles, I'll call it a little less than a year post-surgery. And he's also old, we can make the same argument with Kirk Cousins down there in Atlanta, right? We just don't know what we're getting. But what it comes down to, so you got a little concerns on both of these guys here. One is the reliance of injury, and the other one has his direct injury. And when I'm looking at these guys, I think what it ends up coming down to for me is, I'll say right now, I'm leaning Garrett Wilson. And the reason is, I'm actually more impressed with Cooper Kupp this offseason, and I think that you can get better value waiting and maybe taking him in the 5th round, depending on – I don't know if his ADP's shot up. I know there have been a lot of reports at his solid camp and looking 100% healthy. And we know when he was his last fully healthy season, he was the wide receiver 1 in fantasy football by far. And so you're talking about a guy that's coming back and people are automatically assuming he's kind of in that Mike Evans territory, that guy that is probably going to produce, but he always overproduces based on his ADP. And that's where Cooper Kupp is being valued at right now. So, you take that into account. Matthew Stafford, he likes to spread the ball around, and we know the rapport he has with Kupp. So I'm just talking about a little more target share that Puka is going to have to deal with compared to Garrett Wilson in New York, who his biggest op right now is Mike Williams, right? I think that
Lazard.
Lazard, right? Lazard, I'm surprised. The only, he's one of those LeBron, James Joneses of the NBA. If you guys are basketball fans too,
he knows the guy, so he's on the team.
He knows the guy, so he's on the team, right? So, and once again, Mike Williams also coming off an injury, and he's still, I believe, on the PUP list. So you're talking about him not sharing that many targets. Now, you add into that they both have solid running games in Kyren Williams and Breece Hall, or I shouldn't say solid, very good running games. And so, that does open up the field. But I just think the target share for Garrett Wilson is just so much higher. And he was able to show us that he could produce even with a carousel of quarterbacks, right? And he's still, maybe the touchdown numbers weren't there, but his target rate, his catch rate, fantastic. If Rodgers is healthy, this guy could end up being in the categories of Jamar Chase's, in my opinion. Maybe not. I wouldn't put him at CeeDee Lamb because we know Dak just volume feeds, but so does Aaron Rodgers. He always did that with Devonta, did it with Jordy and others.
Great point. Totally forgot about Devonta. Like when Devonta was in Green Bay, and just a quick side note, if you're Devonta Adams, like how sick do you have to be knowing that you forced your way out of Green Bay? We understand Aaron Rodgers was leaving, but then you have Jordan Love now budding into maybe a superstar, and it's like you could have kind of cemented your Hall of Fame case like this.
Let me say this real quick too, Sean. Did you hear about the potential trade that was on the table for the second overall pick last year to the Raiders for CJ Stroud?
Yeah.
And Josh McDaniels overrode the ownership group, and they decided to go with Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah.
CJ Stroud and Devonta. That would have been unfair.
So New England.
Just more salt on the wound for Devonta Adams there.
New England mob ties strikes again. Like I get it. Jimmy G had his, I feel like his highest peak was when he was Tom Brady's backup. Even though I know it's crazy to say because he went to the Super Bowl with the 49ers, but it wasn't because of him. So it's like I feel like his highest value was when he was like in the practices with playing behind Tom Brady. But I'm with you too on Garrett Wilson. I kind of feel like, just looking at his stats the last 2 years, like touchdowns, he only has 7 touchdowns over the last 2 years, which we understand why. I mean, he had Zach Wilson and whoever else. Was it Mike White was throwing to him? He didn't have a lot of options
for a bit.
So to me, that's going to go up. But to me, like you said, the target shares, average yards, like he's been over 1,000 yards, kind of similar to how Chris Olave is. He just knows how to get open. He's an Ohio State receiver. And to me, I think to your point about Puka it is an injury concern. Like anytime I always feel like, and this is not a saying that I've stated or quoted, but a lot of NFL players who are retired always say, if you limp into camp, that's never a good sign because then it's more than likely you're going to be injured throughout the season. So to me, it's like, I don't know if I trust that. I'm sure he's going to be 100% because all of them say that. But the Cooper Kupp point is, I mean, how many years ago was that? 2 years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where he was like in contention with being like the number one pick in fantasy. And it's because he had that rapport with Matt Stafford. He's not reaching that again. But if reports are true about him being 100%, he's going to eat into that target share. He just is.
Yeah, exactly.
He's going to eat into it because he's too talented. Whether it's Puka being, we all know Puka's going to be the number one option. But if the number one option is Puka and the coverage is sliding over there, then guess who's going to receive that? Because I think Matt Stafford is one of those quarterbacks who's just like, I mean, I get Puka as my number one guy. It may be in clutch moments or crunch time I'm going to go to him. But, if I need this, it's 2nd and 4 and I need this first down, I might throw this a 15-yard out route to Cooper Kupp, and I might do that a couple more times to get us down the field. And to me, especially in a PPR type, format, getting those receptions are critical. So, I'm leaning towards Garrett Wilson because I don't see anybody behind the Jets, man. I just don't. Alan Lazard, I know he might get some high target shares early because it's just he's Aaron Rodgers' dude, and he's kind of talented. But it's Garrett Wilson or bust. And to me, with the guys that's been throwing on the ball over the last 2 years, and he's still been able to get 1,000 yards, speaks to just his talent.
Yes.
I just think he's gonna run rampant with Aaron as long as, like you said, Aaron is healthy. He's gonna run rampant and get his touchdowns up and be a feature guy. And I think, looking at this is courtesy of Fantasy Pros, but just looking at the tiers, like it wouldn't be like in this one, he's number 7 behind AJ Brown. And this is, like I said, PPR. He's behind AJ Brown. I think he can equal AJ Brown. Amon Ra's gonna be tough. But I mean, Jamar Chase, the thing is with him is, and this is gonna be brought up later, but I just think T. Higgins is another guy. Like me and you have both kind of shared the sentiment of like he could be a number 1 receiver on some teams. So it's like
behind Jamar.
I just think with volume and share, like I like Garrett Wilson a lot.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm in unison with you on that one. So yeah, going into our next topic, I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit of the overrated, underrated receivers. This one for me was very tough because the overrated,
it's hard.
This is gonna seem it's gonna seem like a diss, but this has just been my philosophy. And like I said, if you're in my 14-man lead, turn this off because I don't want you to get advantage over me. But it's dealing with the Texans. I do not know what to do with their receiving core because you had a guy, Nico Collins, who came on. Like he's I think there a couple years. He's the prototypical 6'5", 200-pound receiver that can go down the field. So you love that. You got Tank Dell, who, if you watch college football, you knew he was a baller. Like, if you're an NFL guy and saw him at the combine and stuff, he's like, yeah, he's explosive, but he's real small. But it's like, if you just watched his game, it's like, yeah, that's going to translate because he just knows how to get open. And he did that his rookie year before he got hurt. And then you have the quintessential pro and Stephon Diggs, who, if you're asking me this question 2 years ago, there's not a debate on who the number 1 receiver is on that team and who I'm drafting. But to me, with CJ Stroud, we know he's going into his second year. He's going to be an even better quarterback. I think out of those 3, who makes me nervous the most is Nico Collins. Like, especially in like if you're in a half PPR or PPR league. Like, I am of the other belief that the targets are going to go to Stephon. I just think they're going to go to him because that's just what he does. Like, Stephon is a down the field receiver, but more so than anything, he is slant, hitch, corner route. Like that's his game. And to me, he's going to be moving to change. Now, some would say, well, why can't Tank Dell be that guy? I think he can be that guy, but Stephon is coming in as it's like how they talk about aura. He just carries himself as a number 1 receiver. And I know he's 31, and everybody's gonna be like he's lost a step, but I mean. What did he finish last year? Do you know where he finished last year?
I think he was actually pretty subpar last year.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, I would have to look. Because right now he's like kind of a little down on a lot of that.
Yeah.
So last year it looked like he finished at 10, which I don't think he was. Or wide receiver.
He was definitely drafted ahead of 10th wide receiver.
Yeah, 10th or 15th. I'm looking at and. Yeah,
depending on half.
Somewhere in that range. So basically for me, I feel like he's on a 1-year deal. So I think if you're on a 1-year deal, you want to be on your best behavior. So I don't think it's going to be an issue of him lashing out because he's not getting targets. And part of that's because I think he's going to get targets. I think CJ and him are going to find a connection. And Nico's going to maybe trend towards, because right now, if you see where he's located, Nico, and I thought this was crazy, like he's located, and this is on Fantasy Pros. He's located 14. In between, like Ayuk and Mike Evans. I'm looking at it right here. Like, no, I'm taking both of those guys. I don't think Nico can reach that because now, if you're telling me if Nico's reaching that, what I'm envisioning is he's just getting a lot of touchdowns because he's like maybe a go ball guy in the red zone, which could be a possibility. But I just don't think the targets are going to be there for him to be in that realm of Ayuk, who's coming off All Pro, and then Mike Evans, who is, like you said, he's just money in the bank. So I think he's a little overrated.
That is the question at wide receiver right now is how do you treat the Texans? I'm in that conundrum myself, deciding whether or not to try and keep Tank Dell, assuming that a good example or a good correlation, I would say, is Keenan Allen with the Bears, like. And Diggs with the Texans. Are they kind of using him as a 1-year, teach up Tank Dell, teach up Nico Collins, who apparently has not been as receptive to Diggs being there, which is very interesting. that if you notice, Tank, and there was one of the what Mechie, I think might be their other young guy.
John Mechie, yeah.
John Mechie, yeah. They said that they've just been absorbing as much as they can with Diggs, and they're always seen talking to him at practice. You never see Nico Collins there because he's proven that he can do it himself. He had an unbelievable season last year. We have to give him credit for that. Actually, one of the best catch rates at all three defensive types, right? Man-to-man zone, and deep balls, right? So, yeah, that is a big question. I don't know where I'm drafting. I think people are going to mess that up. They're either going to take Nico and it's going to be Stephon or vice versa. I think they'll all eat theirs. We've seen teams with 3,000-yard receivers before, and that was even before the current NFL state. I'm envisioning right now the Anquan Bolden, Larry Fitzgerald, and Steve Breston Cardinals with Kurt Warner that made the Super Bowl, right? So, it can happen. They can get it, but they also didn't run the ball as much. Right. And we do know that Joe Mixon is their high usage volume guy that they're going to want to rely on to open up the field for those other guys. And you throw in Dalton Schultz in there, too. I'm actually eyeing a guy that you mentioned a little bit earlier. Once again, this is no disrespect to his talent because I think he's unbelievable. And that's Chris Olave. I'm seeing him at wide receiver 12 and thinking, okay, I would say it's a pretty fair assessment, and maybe it's the poor assessment of these other guys, but there are other players that are being drafted a little bit after him. And you got to remember, we're only talking wide receivers here, but this isn't just a wide receiver draft. So the difference could be a round, right, that you could be saving yourself on if you don't take Olave and instead go with a guy like Mike Evans. Deebo Samuel is after him in ADP rankings right now. Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, Pittman, Diggs, Waddle. I know Olave.
Wait, you would take Kupp over Olave?
Their offense is going to be. Their offense is going to. Well, no. I shouldn't say that. But if Olave is the best wide receiver on the board, and I know I could get a running back maybe, or at that time, so the quarterbacks are going to be going off the board, right? Yeah. I might say, okay, I'm not going to reach and take Cooper Kupp at that round, but I'm going to say I'm fine letting Olave go, getting a different player, and then taking wide receivers, later on. And it really comes down to the offense. Cooper Kupp's offense, if we want to bring that one up, is going to be top 10 if everybody stays healthy. Yeah. The Saints, on the other hand, I know they have Kamara, who I think is actually going to have a pretty good year this year. And they did lose Michael Thomas. He's no longer there. People have been throwing around Rashid Shaheed. I know he's in a bit of a Garrett Wilson situation when it comes to targets, but you're talking about Derek Carr compared to Aaron Rodgers. And I just think that there are some other guys. Olave could easily have a top 18 finish. I think he'll easily be in the top 18. But if you're talking about where he's going, I also put a little bit of Drake London in that. But this is all around the uncertainties of these guys. Because other than that, I mean, Devonta Adams might be a little bit overrated, but he's going to get a heavy target share. I think a lot of these guys, it's hard to say that they're overrated because they all have the potential to be top 15 wide receivers. But if there's one guy that I know will not be getting as many touchdowns, probably Chris Olave compared to the Cooper Kupps, right? I think Alvin Kamara is going to get a lot of looks in there. They love to run their bulldozer running backs in the red zone. They like Jawan Johnson, their tight ends they throw a lot to in the red zone. Mm-hmm. So Olave is just kind of a guy that, I don't know. It reminds me a little bit of Pittman. I don't want to draft him. It's for a little different reasons. Pittman's obviously because I think Anthony Richardson's just going to try and do more on his own with Jonathan Taylor. But it's just kind of that I really need to see how they mesh with these guys and see Olave as a true number one where he's garnering all of the attention. Like he's going to get – there's no one else that the secondary should be focusing on that team except for a Shaheed go route. So they're going to be double teaming Olave all season.
Like I kind of can see your point because outside of Devonta Adams, like Drake London is going to be Atlanta's number one. I like their quarterback. Right. Michael Pittman. It is kind of a wait and see with Anthony Richardson, but I still like the upside there. Waddle's got Tua. Ayuk's got Purdy, and even Nico and Mike, like with Baker and
like for example, like the fact that Deebo is behind. I know he's one spot behind, but Deebo is unbelievable, and he's more of a Swiss gadget.
And they use him like he's the alpha. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I know he's a true number one, and it's hard to say that they're overrated. But I guess I would say this more as like a hesitancy when you're talking about a top 30 pick. That is where my hesitancy lies.
I think he has a little bit
of about 24th. That's early third round in a 10-man league.
I think what it is he's got the Garrett Wilson thing too. Like he's an
Yes.
Ohio State receiver who they both had 1,000 yards, touchdowns are low. So I think everybody, at least the fantasy guys, were looking at him like they're both super talented, and maybe they're not as even though we're lower on Derek Carr. I think maybe they're just like Derek Carr is serviceable enough to where Olave is not going to really find it there, but he might be able to be like a true I guess difference maker for them, but. I mean, I like I said, if you want it, the thing with receiver is, to me, I feel like this year is so deep, like you don't have to reach on Olave. Like now, if you're in a league with, more dudes like I am, then you might have to maybe take a reach. But even still, like I don't even think in a, like I said, 14-man league, you have to reach for Olave unless like you have like a strategy of like, there's a receiver we don't know about that could be another steal or something. But speaking of receivers, I actually threw this in one of my groups earlier because we were just talking just fantasy guys, and I was telling them like one guy I'm super high on, and I don't think a lot of people are because of like the other acquisitions, is your guy DJ Moore. He finished last year's receiver 6 with spotty quarterback play.
All right.
It's just like I think he can be used in a multitude of ways. And I feel like, and this is just me, I know you're the Chicago guy, so you can speak to it in a minute, but he seems like one of the more just underrated players, period, in the NFL. Like, he had 1,300 yards, like I said, with the quarterback play not being as good. And to me, he does everything as a receiver. I mean, only thing that people can maybe knock him for is he's just 6 foot. But
he's
like
not a
he
jump
can
ball
go,
guy.
He can be go ball guy when he wants to. He can take it over the middle, take it for 45 yards. He can do end arounds. You can throw receiver screens to him. Like you can do post patterns for him. Like he can run every route in the route tree. And I think when I was talking about it earlier, like the game that sticks out in my mind the most is the game when they played, I think, at Washington, where he was just going crazy.
He had 240 yards and like 3 touchdowns.
He was going insane. And to me, that just screams like if he just gets a guy like we think Caleb Williams is going to be the guy, I think it's going to be very clear early that he's the guy. Keenan Allen, like I'm not hoping he gets hurt, but I think he's a 1-year rental. And the only thing that makes me a little nervous is if Odunze really comes on strong and then now they're like splitting. But it's like, it's still, now I will say out of all the positions, receiver is usually the one where you can tell like, okay, this guy's going to be able to go. I mean, just look at Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Like their quarterback play has not been the greatest. And they both, the first 2 years had over 1,000 yards and a couple of touchdowns. So like, if you're a receiver that's worth your goods, you're going to get your numbers. But I just think DJ Moore, like for me, when I was looking at like where he's ranked, like he's like once,
like a little bit of Texans. That's the only thing.
I think Texans. No, because I think Tank Dell is like right now I would rather have Tank Dell than Keenan Allen. And I know Keenan Allen is like a guy that gets numbers, but Keenan Allen gets hurt a lot. And I know Tank Dell got hurt, but
would you rather have Diggs or Keenan? Because I would say the equal is like Nico.
Diggs.
You take Diggs. Okay, so like,
but then
DJ Moore over Nico. I'd take Diggs over Keenan. Would you take Tank over Odunze? I know you haven't seen him play, so it is
that's it's by default. I would say I would rather have Tank because Tank was, like I said, he had some crazy numbers last year, and he had some really clutch catches. Like I remember that one catch he had. I don't know who it was. We had like
a game
zone. Yeah, like he's a guy that can get open. So now I was going to side with the guy who's gotten open, but that's just because of default. But I'm looking at just guys like him and Debo toss up, but like I said, I'd rather have him than Nico. Like Ayuk. One thing that scares me about the 49ers is like, I wonder if it's because Kyle Shanahan, yes, he has all these weapons, but we know that Debo is the guy they love to use. And I think if you ask Shanahan how they would prefer Purdy to play, is they want him maybe throwing 23 to 27, 28 passes a game. I don't think Purdy's going to be throwing 40 to 45 passes or 35, 38 passes a game. So to me, I know Ayuk went crazy last year, but I still think they feature Debo more, and I think he'll just be a better fantasy play. And it's like, honestly, I ain't gonna lie, like I think I might want DJ more like over Jalen Waddle slightly. Yeah, like I think I might want him slightly over him.
I actually would say by a lot. Actually,
well, only reason why I say slightly is because Miami's offenses, Jalen Waddle, I think could have some explosive games. Now I would not take him over Michael Pittman, but
yeah. Tua just scares me. Tua is one of those guys where I'm like, when's he finally going to have his year that he gets exposed? And I know he had like the whole injury stuff.
So I hope it's not soon.
Exactly. Well, hey, I'm not rooting for anybody to have like a bad season. And obviously with Tyreek Hill there, it's hard to mess up because you can't really underthrow the guy, right? And that was always kind of his issue was Tyreek, or Tua couldn't throw the ball that far, but Tyreek kind of learned to play a little bit more under his style compared to Mahomes. But yeah, no, DJ. Well, you know me.
I just like him. He's a good player.
I'm gonna support any Bears talk on this podcast. I'm always gonna be down for it. But no, I do think DJ Moore. I think people are severely underrating that they could. I know everyone's all on the Texans, but they could have the best wide receiver duo in the league this year with Keenan. I mean, they just get open and they catch everything, right? So this makes Caleb Williams' job so easy, and it allows Rome Odunze to literally learn under two of the current, top 12 wide receivers in the league. I would say, fantasy is besides the point, but learning the game, right? So, and it only helps Caleb. So to your point, this transition may not be as seamless as CJ Stroud, and maybe Stroud just did it because he stopped thinking and there were no expectations on that Texans team. There's a lot of expectations on this Bears team, so we could have a little bit of a different outcome, but I'll save all that talk for later this month. But underrated, man. I'd say this one's actually the easy part of the wide receivers because there's so many to choose from at such a good value. And I think there's one guy that, not that he gets lost in the shuffle. And I think his draft position fluctuates every single year because some years he's unbelievable and then they shoot him up the boards and then he kind of has a bit of a down year. And that's Chris Godwin. He's wide receiver 33 right now. Wide receiver 33. They have him projected usually in mid-8th round of a 10-man league. You're talking at that point, that's your wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 on your team. If you are drafting heavy wide receiver, like let's say you go double RB in no order, you get 2 running backs, you either go quality quarterback or quality tight end, right? That's usually what people have been doing. And then you're talking about, maybe another backup, a third running back. And then you're talking about your next 4 picks or in whatever order. Godwin could be your 4th wide receiver. And consistently he gets about, when he's healthy, he matches Mike Evans' targets, and he's about double the ADP that Mike Evans is. And I know that Chris Godwin has some touchdown issues, and there are years that he's been unbelievable because he's in that slot position, and he just gets those easy 4-yard kind of curl routes or little slants. But I just think that another year with Baker Mayfield, and if he can stay healthy, I've heard some really good reports about Chris Godwin. So he's a guy that I'm just eyeing as kind of a good bench stash that maybe you can, if you have 2 flexes in your league, I know I have a league like that now, where you could be starting 4 wide receivers at any given time, you might want to go for some depth here. And I just think Godwin, he's wide receiver 33 for one of the better wide receiver 2s on any team in the league. And the Bucs offense is pretty solid. So he's definitely a guy I'm targeting.
Yeah. Like I'm looking at, he's in a tier 5. Like I think I could see him having a better year than Tank. Keenan would be tough. Terry would be kind of tough. Definitely Pickens.
Zay Flowers.
Maybe Higgins or Kirk. Zay Flowers for sure. Even Amari Cooper, as much as I like Deshaun. If Deshaun doesn't return to form,
I know DJ Moore's on at 22 or something like that, but he could easily be up in that ADP 20. I think he could up 7 to 10
I think DJ
slots.
Moore could finish. If as much as I'm hyping him, I think he could finish in the Drake London, Michael Pittman, Chris Olave range, which is right after tier 3.
Yeah,
at the kind of beginning of tier 3. Yeah, because I just.
Well, that's all you're looking for. You're looking for guys that are outperforming their ADP, right? That's really all you can ask for.
Which, if you look at that, that's close to a receiver 1. That's not. I don't think that's a main receiver 1. He's not obviously a Marvin or a Puka or a Garrett.
But you could still get one of those guys and still take DJ Moore. You know what I mean? So that's the thing is, I think a lot of people have to really research the middle ground wide receivers this year because they're likely going to be your wide receiver 2 with a handful of them having cusp wide receiver 1 upside. And you really got to hit on one of those guys. There's probably going to be about 2 or 3 that end up making it through at the end of the year. And, none of us
you
really
could theoretically end up with a Garrett Wilson and DJ Moore.
Yeah, easily.
You could. You could. No. And like I said, if you got that combination,
if everyone stays healthy,
you're cooking with grease. You're cooking with grease with that, I feel like. But going on to our next player comparisons, if I could speak. These are two receivers that I thought were interesting because they're consensus number 2s on their team, with the caveat of the number 1 guy or like super nova alpha number 1. So like Devonta Smith, T. Higgins. Where are you leaning here? Like I said, I know where you stand with T. Higgins, but I don't know if you're gonna go that direction. We'll see.
I'm actually gonna go with T. Higgins, and there's a couple reasons here. Devonta Smith, he's great. He does give me a little reminder of like a Chris Olave, right? He gets a lot of yards, but he kind of gets it in chunks, and he gets a touchdown like every 3 games at best, right? He doesn't see the end zone that much because he is small. He's not a goal. He's a goal ball guy, but he's not like a fade guy. They're going to always give that to AJ Brown. There's a couple things. I mean, Devonta just got paid. Right, he just got his extension in April. T. Higgins' contract has been in dispute for God, how many years, Sean? I mean, when he came out, everyone was like, "You need to pay him right now," and of course, they knew that they were going to try and get Jamar Chase. So whether or not this relationship is completely tarnished with the Bengals organization, it appears to be so. But he's still got to play out because he's a young guy and he needs to get that big fat contract from another team. So he needs to really ball out. So I think his incentive is a bit higher. And then I'm also just looking at the overall teams. I mean, besides Jamar Chase, I think Mike Gesicki is another option. I do like Jermaine Burton. Their young guy that they got there. Apparently he's playing pretty well as of late. But Burrow also just seems locked in. And then you look on the other side at the Eagles. I mean, you're talking about splitting between A.J. Brown, of course, but you got Dallas Goedert there. Saquon Barkley's going to eat up a lot. And the biggest thing is red zone. Jalen Hurts. We don't know how he's going to play without Jason Kelce, but I'm sure as hell they're still going to keep
Cam Jurgens. Remember the name, Cam Jurgens.
Exactly. So, I just think that the target share is going to be a bit more sparse for Devonta Smith compared to T. Higgins, and I just think he has a bit more to prove. And his touchdown upside is a lot higher than Devonta Smith's. So that's where I'm kind of going with this one. I think Devonta is considered to be a bit higher in ADP. About 3 wide receiver slots. 23rd and 26th, respectively, for Smith and Higgins. I'm leaning Higgins. I just think the Bengals have a better pass attack, too, with Burrow at the helm.
Yeah. Everything you said, I echo that. I mean, T. Higgins, to me, if he gets to another team that doesn't have a bona fide number 1, I think he can be that. He just has all the skill sets. He's a great route runner, fast as hell.
Big dude.
Tall. Jump ball, can go over the middle, tough. Like, he just does everything. He's just getting overshadowed because of Jamar Chase is just a better player. Yeah. And that's just unfortunate. But it's like, I think they're very close in skill talent versus Devonta and AJ, because I think AJ is a game breaker. And I'm saying that because I've missed on AJ a couple of years just being dumb.
I've never actually had AJ Brown on a team. And I feel like, knowing me this year, if I were to draft him, he's probably going to end up having a down year. Whether or not that's on Hurts or on him, it doesn't matter. The outcome's still the same.
I will say, though, Kellen Moore is – I'm very interested if it's true that Sirianni's not touching the offense. Kellen Moore is a hell of a play caller. So I'm
got CeeDee Lamb a damn good year, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm wondering.
But, and it's funny, he didn't really get a wide receiver 2 going. You want to know what he did get going? He got the tight end going, which is why I am very high on Dallas Goedert this year. I think he's a good value. Yeah. But we'll get to that. For sure. The only thing I did want to say is what's funny, you pointed this out, because we've seen wide receivers have that chance, right? That now Jordan Addison, with all that he has going on, we saw that completely. I mean, he was a good prospect coming out of USC, right? And everyone said, "Oh, well, he's automatically wide receiver 2." Obviously, he didn't have the pedigree that Higgins does as coming in as a rookie. But once Justin Jefferson went out with that injury, Jordan Addison looked like a true wide receiver 1. With Kirk Cousins, especially before he went down, and even after, he was still getting a lot of targets, So that's, I think, what Sean and I are trying to say with T. Higgins. I think he has a higher upside for that than Devonta Smith. I don't think Devonta could be a wide receiver 1 on a team. He's the same height as DJ Moore, but he's not nearly the size and can, he can create separation, but he can't really get physical with the corners and the safeties. Yeah, that's why I'm leaving.
And you know what's crazy about that too is Devonta Smith was a Heisman winner, so it's like as a receiver that's so tough to do. But I think it's more so about the frame and the build of. Correct. Like, that's not to say I don't think he can't run the route or play like a receiver 1, but I just think
It's like tank.
You're talking about a lot of these receiver ones. They all kind of got the same build of like just what you envision the receiver
6'2" plus.
Team.
They're all 6'2" plus. Yeah.
Like even with Jamar Chase, he's probably like 6'1", but he's built like a Debo. And it's just like those guys, like they're heavily built. They're
Justin Jefferson's probably the only one that's like very skinny. He's a bit more like Randy Moss in that sense. But Randy Moss was extremely tall, right? So they all have at least one freak thing about them that creates them. Yeah, one freak trait exactly.
Yeah. So speaking of Kirk Cousins, just gonna I guess switch it over to our overrated and underrated tight end section. No shares in Kyle Pitts. I'm good.
None.
I'm out. None. I'm not taking them in no leagues. I'm the same way with I can't remember who it was last year I was off or last pod I was off. Running back Najee Harris. I was off of him.
Okay, well that's an obvious one.
Like not taking any shares of Kyle Pitts. And it's because I'm in a wait and see. Now, if you mean to tell me if I got a stacked team and I may be lacking at tight end and it's week 7 and I've seen him prove it over the first 6 weeks and there's a trade, I'll trade for him. But like drafting him, I'm not taking any shares. Because for me, it's like it's equivalent to, and I know it's two different positions, but Kyle Pitts was ballyhooed as like this once in a generation type prospect at tight end because he was so fast and strong and things of that nature.
Don't say Trent Richardson. I already said that one.
But it's like sometimes when you're a player and you're a dog, you just figure it out. And these are two different positions. I know this. But like we were just talking about Olave and Garrett Wilson. They have not had good quarterback play at all. Like Derek Carr is a step above probably the best one out of all of them. But like Garrett Wilson had Zach Wilson, like we said, Mike White, Joe Flacco, God knows who outside of Derek Carr. I mean, he had Jameis Winston, which is a nice backup, but he's not a starter. Like they've had different quarterbacks, and they still managed to get the yardage, the catches, and a few touchdowns. And with Pitts, it's like it feels like he's just constantly like on the cusp of doing it. Now, I do understand Desmond Ridder was a dumpster fire, Taylor Heineke. I get all that. But to me, it's like I just need to see it. I can't take a leap of faith because like he's at – what do they have him at? I mean, I don't know what your rankings say. I got to look at it, but
I think they had him at 7th. He's right after Kittle.
Like, I would rather have Kittle. I'd rather have Ferguson. I'd rather have Njoku, and I'd rather have Goddard. Like, I'd rather have those guys than Kyle Pitts because I know – you know what it is? It's like the Hayden Hurst factor for me. I took him 2 years in a row. You know what Hayden Hurst always got me? 8 to 10, 8 to 12 points. And I'm good with that at my tight end position. I don't need you going, 25 points blowing up or 15, 17 points. Like, I don't need those explosions. Just give me something at that position because I'm going to try to draft everything else really well. So, like, with Kyle Pitts, I just got to see it. Like I said, that does not mean if he blows up in the first 6 weeks with Kirk Cousins, I won't trade for him. Then I might put together a nice package. But, like, I'm Kyle Pitts. I'm all.
So this is interesting, Sean, because I'm actually very high on Kyle Pitts. And I'll just say this. And I'm not saying that he's my, like, underrated guy because I think he's fairly valued. I think all the guys ahead of him are truly – and I would even probably put one or two guys ahead of him, like – well, I'll just say it real quick. My underrated guy is Evan Ingram. I really like Evan Ingram this year. I think the rapport that he built. I know I've given T-Law a lot of flack over the last year or so, but he does have a very good rapport with him. You're talking about Calvin Ridley being gone. I know that they drafted Brian Thomas Jr. Wait and see for him, but I think he'll be a pretty good factor for their team. And Christian Kirk, another very underrated wide receiver that not many people are talking about this year when it comes to target share. But Evan Ingram, man, he's there underneath. He loves those long crossing routes where he just kind of catches it along the sideline and goes for an extra 10 to 15. I'd say him and Njoku are very similar players, with Ingram being a bit more athletic and Njoku being a bit more physical. But I think both of those guys are pretty solid picks here. But really quick on the Kyle Pitts thing, I'm actually targeting him in Dynasty, not as much in redrafts like normal ESPN leagues. And that's once again, most leagues, he's probably under contract depending on when you started your Dynasty. But he's a free agent for the first time in my league, and I think a lot of people are undervaluing him. And if you can get him on a cheap contract, even put him for 2 or 3 years, I know it's a bit of a risk, but tight end is getting very slim because a lot of the very good tight ends right now in Dynasty are being rookie drafted, which means they're auto-contracted. No one else has a chance at them unless you see it and you reach on them in the draft. The Laportas, the McBrides, the Luke Musgraves, Brock Bowers. These are the new wave of guys when Kelce and Kittle, Hawkinson, we've already seen him dealing with injuries. you look at the top 5 now, Laporta, McBride, and Kincaid. Those are 3 new guys that are in the top 5 with Kelce and Mark Andrews still holding strong. So, it is a transitionary period also for tight ends, which is, I think, why I did want to cover this topic today. But, yeah, I think Kyle Pitts, I think he's fairly valued, maybe a little overvalued in the ADP rankings, but I am hesitant, and I do have Dallas Goedert on that dynasty team, just so you know. So I'm not going all in with Kyle Pitts, but kind of
about to say, you got a nice safety valve. You got a nice
little
safety valve.
But Goddard's an 8 to 10 guy, Sean. To your point, he's
That's all I
need.
That's all I need, man. Like, and to me, I get super excited. Like, to me, I always am like, say for instance, my tight end playing in that 1 o'clock window, and I see very early he gets like a end around touchdown or something. I'm like, I'm winning this week because I normally only get like 8 to 10, and that means he just got 7 points, and now he's about to get probably 5 to 6 more. So now he's at like 12 or 15. I'm like,
that's a deadly game, man. That's a deadly game. I'll make a quick callback right now because we talked about him earlier, but you mentioned the Washington game with DJ Moore. I remember getting a text from Zoo, our other podcast guy, and he goes, "Oh man, I'm heading into it was a Monday night game." And he goes, "Oh, I'm chilling." Or no, it was Thursday night. So he's like, "Oh, this guy's horrible, whatever." He's playing against DJ Moore and he drops 44. And immediately it just completely shuts down the rest of your week. It's like the opposite for what you were just saying, the start that you have, you think it's going to carry you through, and then something else just gets thrown in the wretch. But if your tight end performs well, it does give you a boost of confidence, to your point, because it is such a thin upside position, and especially this year. I think because offenses are getting so spread out target-wise, the tight ends are unfortunately kind of eating the crap end of the stick there. So, I don't know. The underrated's interesting though. I want to know who you got for your underrated.
So this is like not a guy I don't think that'll be drafted, and if he is, it's late. But it's because of his quarterback. I think Luke Musgrave could maybe be a sneaky guy that
I like that.
I don't know if he's going to be getting 8 to 10 targets a game, but he could be a red zone threat. And if you're telling me, like I just said, if your tight end ends up getting a touchdown, I kind of like his odds of maybe getting a touchdown or 2 every other game.
Yep.
And Jordan Love, at receiver is weird because I'm off. Another guy I'm off of is Christian Watson. I don't want any shares.
Watch, he's gonna have a great year.
Unless he's super late in the draft, like I'm off of his shares. But like Dontavius Wicks, Romeo Dobbs, Jaden Reed, those are guys who are proven. But I just kind of feel like if you even look in the past when Aaron Rodgers was there, like he always had chances. I know Devonta was his main guy, but he always took chances with the tight end and threw to him. And Matt LaFleur, I think is kind of a little underrated because we're not. I don't think his name ever gets brought up in terms of like the top coaches, but at least what he's doing with Jordan Love, because I'm pretty sure he was the one that drafted him. Like the fact that he's got him,
it was a fluke, last year.
Yeah, and the fact that he's got him playing at this level to where now we're talking about like he may be a potential like top 10, top 5-ish quarterback if everything hits. Like that speaks to him as a play caller. That speaks to him as a coach, quarterback coach, whatever you want to call it. And I think him maybe getting a little creative with the play calling can maybe get Musgrave as somebody that you may not even have to draft. You can just get off the waiver wire if you're depending on how you're.
Oh, he'll be available.
Your draft.
He'll be available.
You could just get him off the waiver wire or do whatever or pick him late and be like, hey, this is a guy that's viable just because of the quarterback. And another guy too that wait and see because I'm not as high on him as Will Levis's option, the Chig Okonkwo. He had promised 2 years
I thought he was going to do good last year. He was my sleeper
last year. Fell asleep. And now DeAndre Hopkins is, I think, going to miss the opener, maybe, because he's 4 to 6 weeks. Calvin Ridley's going to be their number 1 option. But, we saw what happened in Jacksonville.
I think it's Chiggy Okonkwo, like his nickname. Yeah, like he goes by Chiggy or something.
He could be, like I said, as a young quarterback, tight ends are always your best friend. So, Hopkins going down, Calvin Ridley. Yeah. I forgot about Cole. I totally, because of all the options in Chicago, I totally forgot about Cole.
That's the thing, Sean. You look at a lot of these like middle tight ends, Goddard, Cole Kmet. You could talk even, Luke Musgrave, Dalton Schultz. A lot of these guys, they probably would be higher, but they're sharing way too much of the ball. And that, I know I didn't mention this, but my overrated guy is actually Sam Laporta. At 1, I'm not saying wait and see. He had an unbelievable year. I had him last year, and I was lucky enough to have to. Well, depending on how you see it, lucky or unlucky, having to decide between him and McBride from a week-to-week basis of who to start because, they usually weren't aligning with their big games, but they were each having big games. For me, it's just immediately slotting him in as one. Now, I know it's ADP and it does not matter. It has no standing. It has standing on how people draft. But I'm just saying that, he's going in the third round.
Yeah.
The third round. I mean, that's Travis Kelce territory. I mean, Kelce was probably even earlier in most drafts. I remember seeing him go late first round, early second round in a lot of years. But for Laporta to be in the third round, if I'm taking him over, I don't know who else is going there in the third round, but it could be one of the stud quarterbacks. He still has to share with Amon-Ra St. Brown. We've got to see what Jameson Williams is going to be doing in a big year for his contract purposes. Big wild card there. Obviously, Jared Goff has his inconsistent games, right? So immediately slotting him in and expecting him to put up 1,010 touchdowns like that, they're pretty much putting him at what Kelce's expecting every year. And I just think he's a great player, and he'll probably get a lot of touchdowns, but he won't get the catches, and he won't be getting massive amounts of yards because he's great and he's fun to watch, but he is not as athletic as Travis Kelce. He just isn't. He's not. He's a good tight end, but his yak is not at that level. So I'm not saying that he's a bad player. If he falls to you in the fourth round, I'd probably take him. But if you're in the third round and you're considering him, or your wide receiver 2, or your maybe your first RB in the draft because you went wide receiver, I would not be taking Laporta in that third round and expecting him to outperform some of the other dudes that are getting drafted right around him.
I just thought of this because I know you and Zoo talk about stacks, but it's mainly quarterback and I think receiver stacks. Mm-hmm. Which stack would you want more, the Harrison McBride stack or Laporta Ramon St. Brown stack? I literally just thought of that.
Probably MHJ and Trey McBride. That might be a blasphemous thing to say because both of them we need to see MHJ in the first place, and we need to see if McBride can do what he did in the second half, right? But But for me, it does come down to the fact that the Lions do love to run the ball, and I know the Cardinals have too. But now they have a legit passing game with Kyler back too. So it's and we don't know if James Conner's, God. Once again, another dude we're waiting to regress, right? Yeah. He's just been top 12 running back. Can they really rely on him as much as they have the past 3 years? Versus, I know Jahmyr Gibbs just got injured, right? That's a big thing.
Hamstring,
talk about that. Hammy limping into week 1, right? Like you said,
you don't like that.
Not a good idea. But they still have David Montgomery. Now his value. I know we were just talking about running backs last week, but Jesus, his value just skyrocketed. Jahmyr Gibbs, right? So I just think McBride, and I know we're going to talk about him shortly, but
that's
a tough one. I just think the deep ball for MHJ is going to create some monster weeks. It's going to create some monster weeks for him that you just
bombs
don't really
away. I could see
as much.
Yeah, I could see it. I just was wondering where he's going to go because I know we're about to start talking about McBride, but if I had I probably would still lean Laporta just because Laporta had a crazy year last year, and Amon-Ra and AJ Brown are two guys that I've kind of never I don't know why I just didn't draft AJ especially. Just it bothers me that I passed on him a couple times, but
especially with your Jalen,
is a guy who I always kind of undervalued because I think it's just size wise he seems like he's built like a slot receiver, but he's not. He plays like a alpha number 1, and he's a target. He just gets a lot of targets. So. Speaking of the tight ends, we're not going to be talking about Laporta, but this last one, 2 tight ends that are, at least for the chatter that's online, they're both viewed as rising tides. These are guys that probably more than likely going to get a lot of targets and, maybe as a result of that, a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. And we're talking about Trey McBride and Dalton Kincaid. And P. Bush, who are you leaning towards?
This, I know we said this before we started recording, but I would say this is probably one of the most even player comparisons you can make in any fantasy across any position this year. I would argue that the Puka Garrett one's also very close as well for different reasons. But, I mean, you look at McBride and Kincaid. They both are young. They both have very mobile quarterbacks.
Yep.
They both have decent competition for targets. I'll say that with a differing touch because – McBride has to compete with Marvin Harrison, and Jesus, we know what that's going to look like, right? So that's kind of what Hawkinson had to do with Justin Jefferson right before Jordan Addison got there. That was something to consider. And then obviously James Conner's still there. And so he's good out of the passing game, and we know that they still like to run the ball. And then on the Bills side, it's more of a volume of targets. I think they're going to spread it around more between Shakir, Coleman, and who's their other guy? Shakir, Coleman, and Curtis Samuel. Who apparently has actually been getting a lot of attention from Josh Allen in camp and even in those preseason games. Shout out my Bears. Had to take them down, But, and then they also have James Cook out of the backfield who loves to play in the receiving role. So they're very situational, very, very similar situations, and they both have red zone running quarterbacks, which is another thing to consider. So I think where I come to a difference is Kyler coming off of his injuries and with his better options now, is he going to lower his running ability, not running ability, but rushing attack, and especially in the red zone for, taking away from McBride, Connor, and Harrison Jr. Josh Allen's not doing that. He's going to be running the ball. We know that for a fact. Absolutely. So that's one thing I would actually put as a pro for McBride, because I do think he's going to have some more red zone opportunities than Kincaid will, even though he has to share with Harrison Jr. And the other thing is coverage. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to open up the middle of the field for Trey McBride all season. And he's going to have – if you're in PPR, I think McBride is the easy choice. I think if you're in standard or half point, it does make it a bit closer. But there is no guy on the Bills that's doing that. Keon Coleman, unless he comes in and is an absolute god, or he could turn out to be Kelvin Benjamin. Everyone remembers when the Bills got him back in – or not – no, was it Kelvin Benjamin?
The Panthers got him, and he had a great year.
But then he went to
the Bills got him, and he kind of he just fizzled out a little bit.
He fizzled out, right?
So remember him and Cam got into that altercation, I think.
That's right. That's
because they were
they were beefing for something. But, we don't know that with the Bills of someone that can truly take away. Now, you do have to have the middle linebacker spying Josh Allen, that is also something. But they have to do the same thing with Kyler, because no team really knows how the Cardinals are going to approach the season with him. So I'm leaning McBride. You can get him in like the mid-fifth round. So that brings me back to my Laporta thing. I think they could have equal seasons fantasy-wise.
For sure.
Or McBride could even outplay him, or Laporta even a little bit. But you're saving 2 rounds of draft capital on a position that yes, it does go fast, especially when they start going. But I think McBride is the best value at tight end this year. I just think he is. And he's the third right now, with Kelce sandwiched in between Laporta and him.
I'm with you. I'm a Kincaid guy. I was a year early. He did help me win a couple of games. So, I'm always going to be indebted for that. But I just think McBride is going – and this is, to me, it's not even really, I feel like, about these two guys. It's about the ancillary parts, to your point. You got Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't even know who's their third guy. Is it Michael Wilson?
Rondell Moore? Rondell Moore.
Rondell Moore. One of those. Michael Wilson for sure. Yeah. So it's like that, him, and then on the Bill side, you got Keon Coleman, you got Curtis Samuel, who's proven to play in this league, well at times. Khalil Shakur, who he had some moments last year. He wasn't just a guy who was running around and just getting airtime.
Bit of a Cole Beasley. He's a bit of a Cole
Beasley.
And I think,
obviously, what the Bills are doing I think it's a very similar approach to what Mahomes is doing in Kansas City. You got the stud tight end, and you got receivers who are, ancillary parts, and they're not the stars of the team, but they'll be able to play within their roles. Keon Coleman has the chance to become a star, but if you know anything about Keon Coleman, and with James Cook, compared to Pacheco, I'd rather have Pacheco, but that's beside the point. I do think Coleman has a chance to become a bigger star, but what you do know about him is he's not the 4-3 down there, opening up the offense. He's going to be eating a lot in the middle of the field, maybe on a lot of contested catches. So I kind of feel at first when I saw it, I was I was wanting to lean Kincaid because I just think Josh Allen is the better quarterback, and I think Josh Allen has already had a year in the system with Kincaid, and I think that they're going to want to feature him more. Now, to your point about McBride versus with Harrison, I think Harrison Jr. obviously is going to be featured a lot, but with McBride was doing last year, I think you're going to be forced to have to feature McBride a good amount. And to your point, if Harrison comes in and is the goods, then McBride is going to have a lot of open grass, to your point, in the middle of the field. The only thing, like you said, concerns you is if Harrison Jr. comes in and he's coming off to a slow start. Because then now you're looking at a situation where they're just keying in on McBride, and I don't know if he's going to have the same year. But I think it's a toss-up between the both of them. I just think it's, some may say you guys are talking too in-depth, and it's just going to come down to which quarterback do you like better and who's going to feature more. And to your point, I mean, Josh, what we know about Josh Allen is, at least up to this point, and it's part of the reason why sometimes I'm kind of off Josh Allen, is he plays like he's a halfback. Yep. So, like, when it gets in between the 20s, he's just going to, like, literally bulldoze over, run around. Like, and that kind of makes me a little nervous with being injuries, for one. And two, that's going to take away touchdowns for where you can maybe have some goal line, red zone type, throws to Kincaid. So, because I think athletically they're both kind of similar. I think I'd probably get the edge to McBride, but like they're both athletic tight ends. Yeah. Like they both can move. So, and one could argue, because I just thought about this, I'm not sure is Dawson Knox still on the team. I'm not sure if he is or not.
I believe he is.
Yeah. So that could maybe, eat into, because I know last year they were a little hesitant. Kincaid kind of had to learn early, but I mean, if Dawson Knox is still there, he may eat away some catches. So I don't know, but it's slight lean to McBride. But like you said, I'm with you. I'm not the overdrafting Laporta. I'm gonna get a call like Evan Ingram. I mean, I'm good. There's some options like
Ferguson. You got Mark. Ferguson's great.
Ferguson's another guy like Goddard, Njoku. Like there's options, and I don't know when Hawkinson's coming back. Did they say like his timetable? I don't know if
I would probably guess mid-season if I were to bet on it.
I mean, it'll be somebody you can maybe take if you draft it perfect, which nobody drafts perfectly. But if you draft it perfect, maybe just take a flyer on Hawkinson late in the draft, just storm, put him on IR or whatever. Yeah. I'm not spending all that capital for Laporta. I'm with you on that. Now, Dynasty is a different animal, I think.
Very different animal.
He's a great play in Dynasty.
You are locking that in, and there's a guy in my league that has Kincaid and McBride on his Dynasty. I've been trying to trade for one of the two. He goes, I got to see them both play, and I gave him respect on that because you should be. Sure. He is them both under contract, and then he should trade one. So it's ridiculous.
So I mean, pass catchers, receivers, tight ends. I think the theme of this podcast is there's depth. And if you do your due diligence and you don't reach on some guys, you're going to come away with a pretty good team. And like I said, it's been trending just like what I kind of spoke about this with quarterbacks. Like more and more as we're going through these years in the draft, there's just more and more athletic quarterbacks. And how fantasy is set up, if you can get a guy who is athletic, can run around, can get you those rushing touchdowns along with a few passing touchdowns, you're going to have a good team. Same thing with receiver. These guys are being used in different types of ways. This game itself is just more wide open, so there's just more opportunities for these guys to catch touchdown passes. So it's up to you as a fantasy drafter to just do your homework. So with fantasy, I hope you guys like the quarterbacks, the running backs, and the receivers. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be getting into, because, I mean, it's already August 13th, we're going to be getting into a little bit of our NFL previews with conferences, so hope you guys are tuned into that. Quantro knows is our YouTube. Make sure you go on those. I'm putting up clips, putting up the videos that you're looking at right now for you guys' consumption. IG, Tyson Talk. TikTok, same thing, Tyson Talks. I'm just putting up clips. I'm doing player comparisons so you guys can, maybe do a little bit of homework. Quick homework. It's not like you have to go into like a Fantasy Pro. Shout out to them. Maybe a future sponsor. But like with me, it's a 30-second clip, and it's just showing you highlights and some stats, and maybe you can just do something from that. So for me, Zoo and P. Bush, we are out.